The one thing, I suppose, from a negative point of view that I hear quite a lot from clients is talking about how the high street is dying a little bit, and Amazon is taking over. And I'm thinking, actually, I might have heard you use this term before, but this whole idea of trying to find the right tenant and making sure that tenant is Amazon proof. So actually, it's a type of business that Amazon, unless they physically find premises for them themselves, they can't. Something you can't sell online. Is that something you've actively sort of looked into as well, or is or do you actually disagree and think actually that the high street isn't dying and there's still a lot of opportunity there for more traditional type businesses?
Yeah, so I've got I'll answer that in two parts. So people have been telling me that the high street's been dying for 15 years. So I've worked in retail commercial property for 15 years for both clients and myself, and it still hasn't died. So it's having a long death. It's actually adapting. That's what it's doing. It's adapting, it's changing all the time, and it always will, because it has to follow consumer demand and it has to follow occupiers' needs. And as we change the way that we shop and the way that we live and what we want, so too the high street has to change. Now, yes, it does have to shrink because, an element of what we do has gone online. So, in the industry, we're kind of like, there's probably about 30% shrinkage that needs to happen nationally to right size the high streets. Now, that doesn't need to happen in every high street because all high streets aren't equal. So it's about knowing your location. So we're talking about secondary locations. So not your big city centres, not your major towns, your smaller towns, your market towns in particular, and suburban retail parades. That's where you want to be investing. They'll always be strong because of the demographic that are around them. And they want to be convenience and service-led tenants. So you want your hairdressers, your opticians, your pharmacists, you want takeaways, anything. I can't go and get my hair done on Amazon. I can do it myself at home in lockdown when I have to, but I don't really want to. It's not what I want to do. So it needs to be experiential, it needs to be service, it needs to be convenience. That's what you're looking for in your tenant. So you're looking for thriving industries, growing industries, and they're changing all the time. So you have to keep up with it, but that in itself can be really interesting to follow. So yeah, I think, yes, there are some high streets that are never coming back to what they were before. They need to shrink. But there are other places that are thriving, independent businesses thrive, and that's where I invest.
How hard is it? Because as you were saying that, funny, I'm dreadful for it. I don't own any commercial property at all. But what I do really find fascinating, and I'm certain you do the same as me. When I'm driving around, if I drive past a parade of shops, I instantly look at what's on that parade of shops. Yeah. I straight away look above it as well and see whether everything's the same level, because I'm instantly thinking, okay, well, if you bought that particular sort of freehold and everything around it's got 3 stories and this one's only got 2, potentially there's room in there. The mind's always working on this kind of stuff. And also, of course, I'm thinking how these things get financed and all that sort of stuff. When you're looking at those kind of parades of shops, you do tend to see the same sorts of things. Usually something quite small as like a convenience store, like a Londis or a Spar, that's my local one, or a Tesco Express. But then you might also get a few, maybe an independent coffee place, independent sandwich place, lots of independents actually. Obviously earlier on we were talking about leases and the size of leases being quite important. How hard have you sort of seen that it is to get the kind of length of lease you need from perhaps the type of independent style businesses that you're likely to see on those suburban shop parades?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely more flexibility required. And that was a trend that was happening before COVID, and COVID's kind of accelerated it. So we'd already moved to 3 years being the standard lease term on the high street, really. And they're trying to, retailers are forever trying to build flexibility in from, slightly bigger brands. So where you've got branded coffee shops, so the likes of Costa and Boots and the branded convenience stores, Tesco, they'll give you a longer lease. You'll generally get 5 years out of them. They'll probably do 10 years with a break at 5. But yeah, your independents are probably going to want 3 years or 5 years with a break at 3, which is effectively the same thing for valuation. You've got to decide what your goal is from your investment. So we invest for the long term for cash flow, effectively. So we want the rental income. So I'm not too worried long term what length of lease my tenants are on, as long as they can sustain the rent, and it's a viable business. And there's always a balance to be had. So when you're trying to add value, you want the longest lease you can get. But the standard lease is 3 years on the high street now. And then also you mentioned, driving along and looking at the upper parts. There's so much opportunity up there because traditionally commercial landlords have no interest in residential or development whatsoever. So commercial landlords are actually quite lazy. And that's what I always say about us as commercial surveyors. We're lazy by nature. Like, we do the easy stuff, the paper exercises. We haven't got the stomach for all this development. So actually, if you are coming from a residential background and you're very comfortable in that space, this is a cracking opportunity to build a very diversified portfolio, take advantage of the cash flow in commercial, and you can be doing the development whilst you've got cash flow from the same property. And that's what I like about it.